Great. Hey, everyone. Thanks for being here and talking to us about our ACUHO-i Intern Summit. We have the three of you together to talk about alternate paths in residential life and housing beyond the hall director role. So to get started, do you mind introducing yourself, describing your current role?
My name is Beth. I serve at VCU as the Assistant Director of Residential Life for Conduct. So for my role, that means that I am receiving and processing all of the incident reports that are documented by our residential life and housing staff, managing the caseload and case management processes for all of our housing hearing officers, which are primarily hall directors. I'm also the liaison for our security and campus safety partners on campus. I conduct some assessment and reporting, and I also directly supervise a graduate assistant, and I collaterally supervise desk operations, which is pretty common for my role.
My name is Taylor Walsh, and I'm a housing assignments coordinator here at VCU. My role predominantly assists with the housing selection process, both for upper class and first year students. Within that process, I manage the gender inclusive housing process, RA assignments, presidential scholar housing, so all those types of things. And then just on the day-to-day, managing any room changes that come into our office.
Hi everyone, my name is Maitlan Sullivan and I serve as the Conference Services Coordinator. So I manage summer conferences with the Assistant Director and a team of students. So it's a little different right now, of course, but I started in February, so I'm still learning a lot of the aspects of my role, but yeah.
Awesome, thanks for sharing. Excited to have a lot of different representation across residential life and housing. I'm curious if you can speak about your career path and specifically sort of what landed you in these unique roles in housing.
Yeah, so I don't mind starting with that one. So I worked with summer conferences as an undergraduate student through my position. I was actually in the student union, working with events and management on the union side. And then when I was looking at internships for ACUHO-i, I actually knew long before then that being an RA or a hall director was not for me. So when I was looking at internships, I really wanted something that did not require me to be a summer hall director. That was big. And VCU's position at the time was actually facilities and assignments. But that summer, I think Taylor, you had just started. So they were like, we don't really have time to onboard a new professional and have an intern. So at the time I was just doing facilities, which wasn't much. And then Nicole, my supervisor currently, had said, hey, why don't you take on conferences? And I was like, yes, absolutely. I'd love to do that. I didn't even know conferences worked with housing because of how it was set up at my undergrad. So I worked in Greek life prior to this as a coordinator for sorority and fraternity life. But that was a lot, and I could not wait to get back to a little bit more of the event planning side. So that's how I ended up here. Previously working, my ACUHO-i internship led me to a job, which is great.
So I, on sort of the flip side of that, started as an RA and went on to be a hall director. And after I was a hall director, that's sort of when I really realized that this is where I could see myself going in the future. So that's when I went back to grad school and got my master's in community and college counseling. So I did things a little bit backwards and was a hall director first and then got my master's degree. But then after my master's degree, I got the job here at VCU as an assignments coordinator. I am an introvert, so I was looking for something a little less on the front lines. So this was a nice position that I could still be involved in residential life and housing, but also not necessarily, you know, on the front lines like a hall director position.
I also, born and raised in res life from undergrad on, did a little non-traditional grad assistantship, which kind of had me thinking a little outside of the box before I even started my hall director role. But after my term as a hall director was coming to an end, I started thinking about what kind of functional areas might be more fun. I didn't really want to be my supervisor, so student conduct came up in a position in an institution that I'd been familiar with my first search. And even though I was in the lowest conduct load building of my campus as a hall director, I was like, yeah, conduct's great. I know nothing about it. Let's do that. So I took a lateral position as a conduct coordinator and did that role for 2 years before moving up to my current role as an assistant director.
Awesome. I love hearing people's different journeys about what lands them here. And Maitlan especially, like, not everyone has to be a born and bred res lifer to get where they are. So thanks for sharing. I'm wondering whether it's in your current role or in roles leading up to where you are now, if you've experienced any notable professional development opportunities.
I would say my graduate assistantship was really a great professional development opportunity. Like I said, I was a hall director before I went back to grad school, so I was sort of thinking when I was applying to assistantships that I would go into something in res life for an assistantship. But the school I went to didn't have any graduate assistantships in res life. So my assistantship was actually in the Center for Faculty in Richmond. So a little bit on the flip side, working with faculty members and their development. So I thought that was a really interesting, assistantship, but also my graduate assistantship supervisor was super involved in student affairs. So she got me really connected to other offices and other people. And I think that was really a developmental process, just because I got to sort of see what it's like to, supervise a graduate assistant and sort of think about what I wanted to be as a graduate assistant supervisor in the future. Really being that somebody who can connect an assistant to, different people on campus and sort of help them sort of expand their net for where they might want to go in the future.
I have two that really stood out to me. Besides just, like Taylor said, a graduate assistantship, internships, all of that. But at my previous position, they had no idea that they were preparing me to leave, which I feel so terrible about, but they gave me some of the best professional development opportunities to really figure out what I wanted. So we did a book read, and I did it with a couple of other like grads and new professionals, mainly the hall directors. And it was called Quarter Life Crisis. And I was like, why am I feeling this way? What is happening to me? I don't like anything that I used to, like, just life was not working out the way that I wanted it to. And this book really helped me figure out that I was not in the right position for me. Everything else was going great, but my work was not, it was just not meshing. And then the other one was our entire team went and we became strength coaches. So if you've ever done Clifton Strengths, Strength Quest, anything like that, we went to their Chicago headquarters and became trained coaches. Not certified yet. That's a goal later. But that I'd never taken it. So that was beyond eye-opening to sit in a room for 2 days, 8 to 8, and really just dive into your own strengths. How do you coach? And that was ultimately in November when I figured out I needed to job search, and I found out about this position, and it was that all really led me to figure out a little bit more about myself and how I can use my strengths and who I am to really be a better professional and what that looks like. So those were two that really were helpful for me.
Yeah, I think similarly, I've had a lot of collaterals and opportunities provided within my position, but the two big ones outside of just the day-to-day work and campus environment that really shaped my career were the traditionally like big institute or affiliated things. So I've attended and participated in both the National Housing Training Institute through ACUHO-i and ASCA for Student Conduct's Gehring Academy, which is kind of their equivalent. Both very transformative experiences, both very intense experiences, because it is a full week of just engaging in professional development in your field with trained faculty and cohorts and very specific experiences. But if you can leave one of those conferences and feel like, okay, I at least know what I'm talking about in this field, it helps you feel more informed in making decisions about what you want to do in the future.
Yeah, that's great. Such a variety of professional development, not only that you can find in your role, and whether it's being a grad assistant or the collateral assignments, but also these great conferences and other national opportunities as well. Thanks for sharing. So now that you've been in your role for various lengths of time, can you talk about what your greatest challenges are?
I would say probably the greatest challenges in working in housing is just dealing with, the angry parents and the angry students, particularly after, the selection process. It seems like we have like 2 weeks where we just spend 8 hours every day taking angry phone calls. And so I think that's definitely a challenge, just to, be in that mindset for 8 hours a day and realizing that some people you can help, but some people, they can't give them what they're asking for. But, trying your best to help them and put them in a place to succeed. But also just realizing that sometimes you have to say no. And I think that's, a challenge when you're in that mindset for, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for a couple of weeks. So definitely a challenge.
I think for conduct, and this may be more specific to kind of the behind the scenes of running residential conduct than the front lines of implementing it. The biggest challenge that I face in this role is trying to find the balance between designing processes that meet the needs of students and designing processes that respect staff time and resources. And that sometimes falls on to the hall directors to some extent, that we just need to meet these students' needs. And yeah, it's going to be a crazy 2 weeks once all the honeymoon phases of roommates have waned and now they're all miserable. But that's our responsibility for this role. And that means that conduct needs to be a priority for that.
I would say one of my biggest challenges so far has been that this position falls under facilities within residential life and housing, which is brand new to me. I just bought a toolkit, and then our staff meeting is spent talking about how we're fixing leaks and fire panels and things go right over my head. So I'm not only learning my job, but I am learning residential life and housing facilities. And as someone who, I lived on campus all 4 years, but I was in apartments 2, 3, and 4, I really had no interaction with res life in the same capacity. So it's a very different world, but it's been made a whole lot easier by having a good team who's understanding that this is all brand new.
Great, thanks for sharing, you guys. So you're in these roles, these unique roles, and I'm assuming this is not where your career ends, that you're all at various stages within your career, whether that's in residential life and housing, in student affairs, or elsewhere. So can you talk about how this role will help you in your overall career trajectory?
So after making kind of the lateral move into student conduct, I thought a little differently about my career, because I really took the hall director position without a clear path in mind, and then just kind of winged it from there a bit, which is totally fine. Just like we tell freshmen and sophomores, you're going to change your major 7 times. Don't worry about it. You have years and years and years and decades to make a career. But in the last 4 years in student conduct, I've been aiming to stay in that student services, student support world, which is growing. There's definitely a larger population of positions that are available to serve in this kind of capacity, and aiming towards the ultimate goal of serving as an ombudsperson for a campus, which is kind of like a unique role. But this position kind of keeps me in that world of learning policy, learning procedure, definitely interacting and engaging with a lot of different campus partners, figuring out how to best advocate for students and their needs on campus, and navigating the politics a little bit of an institution, especially as you move up to the mid-level positions. So that's kind of how this position has kept me on track a little bit.
I think for my position, it's just very different from the hall director position. That position is very forward facing and very, very student centered. And I think that my position is still very student centered, but in a very different way and different goals. So I think that will, help me in the future, being able to sort of see what goes on, quote unquote, behind the scenes in the central office versus, seeing what goes on front lines in the residence halls. And so I think that will really help me, to sort of have that experience and to move forward. whether that's in residence life and housing, or whether that's, in other offices. I think that, other offices across campus also have, forward-facing roles, who engage with students and sort of that behind the scenes as well. And so I think that this will put me in a really good position to have both of those experiences.
I was holding off slightly. My dog's been screaming, so I apologize if that happens again. So for me, I know my end goal when I know that I have completed my life's mission. I want to be the president of an institution one day. So this is a really good position to build those community relationships and really figure out like where my partnerships are and branch out a little bit more and get that business side of student affairs that we sometimes don't like to talk about. But residential life and housing in and of itself is a business. So we should be having those conversations, and being a revenue generating office and position is really exciting for me because those are experiences that I don't have. So I think this is going to be a really good opportunity to build those connections, be seen at all levels, working with both students who work and training them, who work for conferences, as well as the campus partners and community partners from all ages. So yeah.
Yeah, I so enjoy hearing where everyone's path is headed. I think that a lot of the folks who will be viewing this panel discussion are also in similar boats, where they maybe don't necessarily know what their next step is or are exploring a lot of options. So I think it's really validating to know that that feeling is true at the graduate level, at the entry level, at the mid-level. It just keeps going. So with that, I kind of just have a closing question here. A little bit harder to do when we don't actually have participants in front of us to have a Q&A, but just picture yourself in their shoes and that you are just starting out in your career and not doing kind of what everyone else is doing with the hall director role. What advice do you have to these new professionals who want to serve in a similar role as you?
The best advice that I was given was not to compare my job search to anyone else's. Oftentimes, this year is going to be a little bit different, of course. Hall directors, they go through TPE, or their searches are a little bit sooner. I know my first position didn't even have, like, it didn't even open. I didn't even start any interviews until almost 2 months after everyone who was doing hall director searches. And that can be really disheartening, but all that matters is at the end of the day, you're in a position that works for you. You know your must-haves and your absolute no's, and you don't really bend on those as long as they make you happy and they make your position what it's supposed to be, because the jobs are out there. Just don't be comparing too much. Comparison is the major thief of joy in life. So yeah.
I would probably have to say that, there aren't as many housing positions out there in terms of, like, when you're looking at like hall director positions, there are a lot more of them. I wouldn't encourage students to just take, any position, housing position that comes along. Obviously, the school needs to be a good fit for you. Don't take like a running leap outside of your comfort zone, but, just keep in mind sort of in the back of your head that, maybe you stretch your comfort zones a little bit to, a school that you maybe hadn't considered before, but, take a second look at if there is, a housing position open, just because they don't come open very often. I mean, if you look at our office, I've been there for 3 years and I'm the newest person. And then on the flip side, my counterpart has been there for 43 years. So you just need to take into consideration that these jobs don't always come around as often as hall director positions. So maybe sort of thinking outside of the box in terms of what you're looking for in an institution or in a school.
Yeah, and similarly, I think we're seeing a lot of change in the way traditional student affairs paths have come along. So some of the advice you may be getting about timelines, or how often you should search, or what kind of time you should spend in a position, when you should look to move up or out, some of that doesn't necessarily always apply to people. And again, comparing yourself to the advice and experience of your supervisors is also something you don't want to do. So don't be afraid to take a sidestep or take a lateral position or move into a better fit of an institution if it's going to be what's best for you and if it gives you an opportunity to try something out. I mean, I took a lateral move for 2 years and it gave me the step I needed to get into a perfect role as a mid-level professional. So sometimes it feels like itchy and not quite comfortable because it's not what people have told you your journey should look like. But if it works, then it's what your journey should look like. And go for it.
Great. Those are all the questions that I had prepared. Really appreciate it. And I know our participants will really appreciate hearing all of your perspectives, not only what has led you to where you are, but also where you plan to go and that valuable advice that you shared. So if we can close this interview with you just once again sharing your name, your title, and then your email address in case participants want to reach out with any specific questions, that would be really helpful.
So
go ahead.
I'm Beth Paris. I'm the Assistant Director of Residential Life for Conduct at ECU. My email address is E as in elephant, Paris like the city, and the number 2 at vcu.edu.
My name is Taylor Walsh, and I am a Housing Assignments Coordinator here at VCU. My email address is TN as in Nancy Walsh, and that's WALSH at vcu.edu.
And my name is Maitlan Sullivan. I serve as the Conference Services Coordinator, and my email address is MA Sullivan, SULLIVAN 2. Oh gosh, yes, at vcu.edu. Sorry, it's still new. MA Sullivan 2 at vcu.edu. Cool.
Great. Thank you all so much, and we'll be in touch soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.